What a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Hassan, for the introduction. I really want to thank Bob Martinez for his leadership, and Randy Irwin, President of the National Federation of Federal Employees, which proudly represents a lot of New York workers, including those at the Watervliet Arsenal. And I am proud to represent IAM workers in New York, and I'm here today to say that I will always fight for your right to organize. Right now, as we speak, rideshare workers all over the country are on strike. And they have a right to be striking. They have a right to be standing up for themselves. We need to stand up to companies that talk about having progressive values, but are actively trying to stifle their workers by underpaying them. Companies that call their workers independent contractors instead of employees, so they can strip their workers of their labor rights and protections. This should not be allowed. And rideshare drivers are striking today because they have been hurt by not having the power to have a union, to achieve better pay, to secure good benefits, even as the owners of these companies become wealthier and wealthier. These men and women are workers. They should be included in the labor movement, and they should be rewarded for their work. This has to be our goal. I believe to my core that what ails America today is that we do not reward work, and we haven't been rewarding work for a long time. Now let me tell you what that means. It means simple things: paying higher wages. It means equal pay for equal work. It means giving employees the structural support they need to thrive. Simple things like national paid leave, affordable daycare, universal pre-K, postal banking. It means fighting for full employment, because we all know that the official rate of unemployment seems low, but real unemployment is much higher. And you talk to workers across America, how many people do you know that are underemployed? Perhaps working 2 or 3 shifts, 2 or 3 jobs just to make ends meet. It also means standing up for workers' rights. Standing up for workers' right to organize, to collectively bargain, standing up for our unions. The power is in our work, and we have to be rewarded for it. So we must stand up for our workers, and that's why this fight is more urgent today than it actually ever has been. Everyone in this room knows it. You know what's happening around the country. You know what's happening in state after state. We have a president who loves to talk about taking care of union workers, but watch what he does, not what he says. His administration is constantly attacking workers' rights. They're making it harder for workers to organize and bargain with their employers. They oppose a pay raise for federal employees. They're undermining their right to organize, and they've jeopardized workers' livelihoods with devastating and irresponsible government shutdowns. They are emboldened by a Supreme Court that has been systematically dismantling workers' rights for years. And they are standing by while good union jobs continue to go overseas. They care more about stock prices and CEO pays than they actually care about workers' hourly wages. They brag about the official unemployment rate, but where were they when factories in the last year shut down in places like Wellsville and Cheektowaga in New York? Where were they when factory was shut down in Burlington, Iowa, or Peru, Indiana? They were nowhere. Here's the bottom line. American workers are still taking a hit, and government needs to step in and do something about it. We need to create an environment where everyone has the opportunity to work hard and succeed. We need to create the kind of incentives so when a factory does shut down, those workers and communities aren't left holding the bag. And we need to do everything in our power to stop that factory from closing down in the first place. The power is in the hands of the people, and we are the ones who have to change it. We are the ones who have to fight against what's happening today around the country. It's a question of whether or not we have the will. We know how. Do we have the will to really lift this up? We've been through this before. Look at our own history. Even our most basic fundamental workplace rights, which every single American worker benefits from today, were only put in place after very hard-fought battles. I'll give you an easy one. Child labor. No one here believes that we should be engaging in child labor. No one thinks a 14-year-old should be working in a factory or a 15-year-old should be working in a mine. But even the fight to end child labor wasn't easy. In 1935, when Congress was fighting to make child labor illegal once and for all, there was actually an outside group called the National Committee for Protection of Child, Family, School, and Church. And what were they doing? Trying to block the reform for ending child labor. They were handing out leaflets. They were handing out pamphlets. They were extremely active. That sounds very familiar, doesn't it? With its nice name, it reminds me a lot of Right to Work. It's exactly the kind of opposition our workers face today, every time they're trying to make things better. The difference is, today they of course have pamphlets and leaflets too, but they also have a great deal of dark money. A great deal of dark money that funnels into campaign after campaign. When the Koch brothers want a tax cut, they just spend $300 million to make sure they get their tax cut. The same thing happened with the minimum wage. And I'm not talking about the debate going on today, we're talking about the first go. Of course I believe our minimum wage should be $15 indexed to inflation. But when we tried to create minimum wage in the first instance in 1938, right after during the Great Depression, people were suffering. And Congress, for the first time, tried to create a minimum wage so people could suffer just a little bit less. The debate went on, and I'm sure everyone can guess why. One of the senators from 1938 made it really clear. Highly paid executives of large corporations have contended that this bill is a dangerous bill. Sound familiar? Highly paid executives say that higher wages are dangerous today. But the minimum wage law still got passed, and it was good for our country. And so my point is this: every single time there is a battle that people know must be waged, people have showed up. They fought. They realized what was at stake, and they refused to stay silent. Their voices, their platforms, their time, their talent, their treasure, all of it went into the fight. If you're not willing to fight these fights, you're going to lose. And so take the lessons of our forebears. If it's worth fighting for, then we have to fight. None of it is inevitable. All of it's in play. So let me ask you this. Do we have the will to do what it takes today? Do we have the will to end sinister right to work for less laws? Do we have the will as a nation to make it easier for people to join a union, to be able to organize, to be able to collectively bargain? Do we have the will to get money out of politics, to actually restore the democracy to the hands of the people? Not the ultra-wealthy, not the ultra-powerful, not the people who write every piece of legislation in the dead of night because they can. Do we have the will to fight against that? I know we have the will to rebuild our country. I believe we have the will to lead this country into 21st century manufacturing and production. I believe that manufacturing jobs must be at the center of any plan to bring back good jobs to our communities. And I want to tell you what I'm going to do that. I wrote a bipartisan bill called the Made in America Manufacturing Communities Act. It gives federal funding to manufacturing communities around the country. They can use those funds to rebuild, to create manufacturing sectors, to create hubs of economic growth for the 21st century. And guess what? I passed that bill. in a Republican House, a Republican Senate, and our Republican president signing it into law. But we have to do much, much more. So right now I'm working on a bill to do exactly that. It's called the Global Leadership in Advanced Manufacturing Act. It's already bipartisan. I will get this bill passed. Watch me. This is the kind of program that our manufacturers absolutely need so they can get more resources into communities that are committed to manufacturing. This bill will make sure that all the best manufacturing is happening here in the United States and not in China or with any of our competitors. This has to be a national priority for our economy and for our national security. And that's also why any trade deals our country makes have to be good for our workers. It's why we need to rebuild our country's infrastructure once and for all, with products and materials proudly made by our domestic manufacturers, by the men and women in this room. We have all it takes to compete. That's the bottom line. And if America's taxpayers, if our money is being spent on these projects, then they should be used to support good American jobs. And I believe that should be our guiding principle for all federal spending on infrastructure and on our technology to support and protect our men and women in the military. But on this administration's watch, the opposite has been true. Thousands of American jobs have been outsourced since President Trump was elected president. Oh. Thousands of workers' livelihoods have been devastated. If President Trump wanted to fulfill his promise of putting an end to outsourcing, one thing he could do right now is make sure companies that outsource jobs are actually held accountable when they bid for federal contracts. But instead, more than $50 billion in federal taxpayer money has flowed to outsourcing companies through federal contracts. He is not on your side. And to add to this broken promise, he's taken a victory lap on the passage of a tax bill that actually gives companies incentives to outsource jobs. This has to stop. And this is what I'm going to do about it. Very soon, I will introduce another bipartisan bill, the End Outsourcing Act, a bill that would penalize companies that try to ship jobs overseas. It's really simple. If a company ships those jobs overseas, then that should be held against them when they are bidding for federal contracts. My bill would go further and would make sure those companies lose federal tax benefits and access to other federal resources. Why should we reward those companies when they don't stand by our American workers? We have to put our workers, not CEOs, not board members, not shareholders, but workers at the heart of our economy again. We have to reward the work of our workforce. And we have to do this so we can keep competing with the rest of the world, just like we used to do in the last century. That also means we need to see Made in America again. Made in America by American union workers. Because when we talk about how manufacturing helped build the American middle class, what we really mean, it was unionized manufacturing that built the middle class. Unionized manufacturing jobs are the ones that lifted wages and benefits across industry. And we need to get our economy back there again. We also need to make sure that we're actually preparing the next generation for these jobs of the future. We need our workers to have access to the high-quality apprenticeship training that only unions offer today. We need our union members to have access to the specialized advanced training at no or low cost so they can keep sharpening their skills and have the right experience for the jobs they want. If we're going to compete with the rest of the world, our workers do need to be ready. Kids need to be learning how to use 3D printers, how to use laser cutters and computerized machine tools in high school so they can be inspired by building things and want to go into manufacturing industries when they finish school. In fact, this is a great example of how new technologies are transforming our economy in a good way, in a way that doesn't have to happen at the expense of our hardworking Americans. Compare that to what Boeing just announced, that they are going to automate hundreds of machinist jobs. That's not the role we want technology to be playing in our workforce. Technology is supposed to be helping our workers, not replacing our workers. Technology is supposed to be about innovation, about excellence, but it is pushing us back. This is exactly why workers need to be at the table for corporate decision-making. Workers' voices must be heard when jobs and livelihoods are actually on the line. That is what should be non-negotiable. So let me close with this. In this moment, we need to be totally unafraid to fight for our unions and to fight for our workers. It is time to give the power back to hardworking people, hardworking men and women in this country. It's time to reward work again. I am proud that New York is one of the most unionized states in the entire country, and I know that we would all be much better served if unions were strong in the rest of the country as they are in New York. So I will join you in fighting for them. Let's unleash the full potential of America's economy. Let's find the American dream again. We must put our workers first. We must reward work again, and we must never, ever give up that fight. Thank you.